Hello and welcome to this edition of Career Path. I'm your host, William Paterson Communication Department Film Professor Chris Williams. Joining me today is Communication Department alum Jon Milano. Jon, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here.
It's been very exciting to see you. I was just asking you a moment ago, when did you graduate from here?
2012.
And since graduating from here, you have gone on to just a little bit of success.
Just a little bit.
Just a tiny bit of
Just a little
success.
bit, yeah.
And I just learned it's two little statues, I believe, that are part of the success. Why don't you tell us a little about...
Two beautiful girls, two Emmys.
Two Emmy Awards.
For my film Straw Dolls, which was my thesis project for graduate school, Chapman University. And we won for Best Drama and Humanitarian Film of the Year. So that was our big takeaway from the film.
That's extraordinary. I understand that you were interviewed on our SFA, our Student Film Association television show Presents, and went into great detail about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a great experience. It really was.
But moving back, I really want to know how you ended up there, how you ended up with those two little girls.
The two little girls, that's what I like to call
I know you as a student here. You were in my class.
Oh, yeah?
Wonderfully talented student with Professor Katowski.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what your experience was like here and how you think that helped you start focusing your ideas in terms of graduate school.
It was... So I was addicted to the camera, addicted to the idea of telling a story since I was 6. And when I decided to go, I originally went to School of Visual Arts for a semester.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Before William Paterson? Oh, I didn't know that.
And I was a film major there, and I realized at that moment that become a storyteller, you have to know more than just film. You have to have human experiences. And that's something you always told us in your screenwriting classes, is that you write what you know. Don't write, just random stuff that you think would tell a good story. And when I was here, that kind of cultivated a bigger idea. I could go make movies. And I drank the Kool-Aid at William Paterson. It's at every water fountain around here.
It.
And I drank the Kool-Aid, and I was thoroughly convinced that if I just keep going and keep trying to tell stories, I could make them. And also realizing that the stories I wanted to tell were going to have to be done in Los Angeles. And the best way to get to Los Angeles, because I'm some broke kid from Hackensack, was to try and apply and get into a graduate program in Los Angeles.
Right. And of course, your professor also is a poor broke kid from Hackensack.
Exactly, and that's why we got along so well.
That's right. So you made our Film 3 project here, which was a pretty large project here.
Bruised.
Bruised. And that film, and I remember you thinking about graduate school. Tell me about that decision, because that's a decision students often make as to whether or not they should go to graduate school.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wrote Bruised in your screenwriting class a year before I graduated, and then took Film 3, and we produced that film. And I was very hands-off because I wrote it, and you don't want to be too involved with something like that. And it kind of inspired me to all right, let's go to the next level. Let's go to the next level. And then in my capstone, I wrote a screenplay, and it was a feature length. And both the screenplay and Bruised, I submitted to various different grants to try and get me. Get me a leg up on my tuition, because I couldn't afford the program at Chapman, and I still can't afford it.
It's about a $60,000 a year school.
Yeah, roughly. And especially in the directing path that I took, because you're paying for your films. They're not. I mean, you could get away with a cheap production and still sell it as a beautiful thing, and that's what you do now.
I often mention to students that a lot of elite schools, and I'm one who professes if you're going to go to a graduate school, go to one of the top schools.
Absolutely.
And they try to scare kids off with their sticker price. And I always tell them, only suckers pay sticker.
You're buying a car, you're buying your education.
That's it. You
never pay sticker.
You're never paying sticker price.
Yeah.
So how did that price tag not scare you, and how did you end up paying for school?
Well, the price tag still scares me.
It's supposed to. Right?
It's supposed to. But what I realized was I'm making an investment on myself, and if I have to pay because I did have to take loans out. I had grants and scholarships that covered a great deal of it, but if I have to take out loans to better myself, that's fine. I could live in an apartment for another 50 years instead of taking out a mortgage. A mortgage is a home, but I'd rather invest in me and my life and making it better. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're still paying off your law degree.
I don't like to talk about that. But tell me, moving from here in, I always say, provincial New Jersey, where you're sometimes scared to even go to another town. How do you make that decision to go to California, of all places?
Well, it's like I said, investing in yourself, career. Los Angeles is not the greatest place in the world. And
whoa, what?
Yeah, I mean, when I drove out there in my dilapidated Jeep for the first time, I saw America, and I was like, I want to live in America. I want to live in Denver. But you get to LA, and you're like, this is where I have to live to make movies. And if I want to make movies, I'm going to make the sacrifice. So it was a no-brainer.
What about your classmates being here, going to a state school? What was that experience like for you? With those, you had a lot of international kids, students who could pay $60,000.
Oh yeah, cash too.
Talk a little bit about that. Again, one of the things I often think that happens is there's a sense, obviously, sexism, racism, but there's also placism. George Bush brilliantly said, he called it the low, the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Oh my
and
God,
in other words, going to a state school, you never imagined that you could compete with those. As somebody who's taught at those schools, I know that many of our students here are the finest students. You're an example of that, as I've ever seen. But talk a little bit more specifically about you in the classroom, looking around at these kids and maybe feeling like you don't fit in.
Well, it's definitely a class struggle right there. Class struggle in the classroom. And but you can't focus on that. But it's hard to avoid, but you can focus on it. And maybe the first week when you're pulling through the parking lot, and it's just like these, like a Maserati and some pimple-faced 18-year-olds coming out of it, you get a little intimidated. But you're like, I'm here for a reason. They don't just accept anybody. They accept storytellers, and that's what I'm here to do, and that's why I was there. And if you keep convincing yourself, and that's what anything is, even if you're not in grad school, if you're trying to tell a story, you have to convince yourself that that's the right thing to do, even if it's the bad thing to do, even if it's the wrong decision.
So you went in as a director.
Yes.
What was the program like? What work did you have to do? And who did you meet along the way?
It was an intensive 3-year program. It started with, Chapman focuses on bringing people in that don't necessarily have a film degree. So you're learning the 1, the 1, 2, 3s, but they called it the 3, 2, 1s. And
the 3, 2, 1s.
They called it the 3, 2, 1s. And your final project your first year is a 3, 2, 1. It's a 3-minute, 3 minutes, 2 actors, 1 location.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah.
But it's a boot camp. And having come from William Paterson, I felt like I was just kind of like, all right, I get it. Like, when can we start making movies? But it was an intensive program for the first year. Second year was more developing, smaller projects that geared you toward your thesis, and then the thesis, being your capstone, being your calling card. But I met some amazing people. Dave Koss, who you went to grad school with.
That's right. Yeah, one of your professors there was one of my classmates.
Dave Koss, who's an amazing talent, and then John Badham, who was one of my mentors. I work for.
He directed
War Games. He directed Short Circuit.
And a
Saturday
tiny film
Night,
about an Italian-American kid in Brooklyn, right? Saturday Night Fever.
And we got along great. And then he was like, all right, you want to work for me? And at that point, I was working for him and working for Relativity Studios and making a movie. And you find a way to juggle this stuff because you're like, I have to produce. You have to be working. You can't sit in your apartment, just waiting for that opportunity to come. You have to fight for it. You have to go find it. And John Badham was one of those guys who was like, I'll buy you a tuna salad sandwich, but you're going to work hard for me.
Right.
And that was a great experience. I also met Martha Coolidge, who was the first DGA president.
That's right,
female.
Martha, who went to NYU.
Who went to NYU.
That's right, she was one of my professors there.
She was, really?
Yeah, she taught there for a little bit. Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was one of my main directing professors. She's all over the place, but she's got a great mind and very inspiring.
Wonderful. Tell me what you might tell a student here at William Paterson right now, thinking about the world, knowing that there's a lot of places that they can go, perhaps being, as you mentioned before, a little fearful. What would you tell them? You've been mentioning about working hard. We have lots of opportunity here, but be a little more specific in terms of classmates and people who can, and finding those people who would help you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all about meshing with your classmates. It's networking, because the guy or a guy or girl that you're sitting next to could be the next president of Fox, and you want to stick with that. You want to stick with that networking communication. And when I say hard work, it's not about, grinding every day. It's about producing and knowing that you could possibly change the world if you keep making content.
Yeah.
And even if it's shooting on your iPhone, which Sean Baker did on Tangerine.
And Darren Dean, one of our graduates, yeah.
Darren Dean, and that won an Independent Spirit Award and changed the whole scope of production.
Right.
But you always could be making something. When I was driving up here, not only was I getting lost, because I only commuted for 5 years, but I was like, oh man, I could pull over and shoot a little short film over there.
Right.
And that's the mindset you have to have, whether it be in graduate school or whether it be in undergrad or whether it be when you're in an independent market. You have to be producing, and that's what you have to. I mean, anything, writing, shooting.
Right. We're going to have to wrap up in a moment, but I do want to ask about your thesis film, because it's gone on to great success. And
Yeah.
I know you were interviewed elsewhere about that. But tell us a little bit about it. It's about the Armenian genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the story come from? And just give us a little overview about it.
Well, it took several years of research based on the story that I was told. And the story I was told was by a survivor, a close friend of mine's grandmother growing up. She was very reluctant to tell the story, but when she did, she told it with great passion, and it was something that stuck with me. So I was like, oh man, if I'm a storyteller, I want to tell a story like this. And that's where it went. And I took it, and we went running with it.
And you're not Armenian.
No.
Your writer is an Armenian.
Nope.
I'm familiar with the story because my aunt's Armenian, and I know the stories. And I was struck by the film and how simple it was in telling this grand story of a genocide. Mm-hmm. How did you go about deciding that that was the way into this horrific story of an event that many people aren't that familiar with?
Well, we've discussed this, with Steven Spielberg when he told Schindler's List. The story of Arthur Schindler is very simple. It's a simple story that's self-contained in a much larger realm. And you see the Holocaust in Arthur Schindler's story. And when I was mulling over the idea of how to tell the Armenian genocide, I said, I can't tell the story of the Armenian genocide. I could tell a slice of that story. And that's more powerful than trying to take on the larger scope. And that's what we did. That's how we approached it.
And tell us about the Emmy Award and what happened to the film there. We're going to wrap up in a moment.
Yeah,
but
the Emmy Award.
We
we generated a Bible, which is every television show has one, and we generated this Bible and we connected it with the film and submitted it to the Emmy Foundation. And out of 37, I think it was like 37,000 films around the world, we were selected and nominated and won. And it kind of catapults the film, and you have to really be on top of it to make sure that it catapults. But we were able to network, and we were able to sell the show. And and I called you that day when we sold it, or when we were going to sell it, and I was like, it's my baby. I've worked years and years on this. What do I do? And he said, sell the baby so you can make more babies. And we did, and we sold the show, and it is it's a very satisfying feeling.
Good.
Though scary, satisfying.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I want to thank my guest, Jon Milano, for appearing today. From all of us here at William Paterson's Department of Communication, I'm Professor Chris Williams, and I'll see you next time.